3.19 has brought along some massive mining changes, including completely changing the stats of all the mining heads, the distribution of different materials, the selling prices of all these materials, and the rock cluster densities and distribution. But one of the biggest changes that came in 3.19 was some changes to both the Mole and the Prospector in terms of their mining performance. And that's really what this video is going to be focusing on, so let's get into it. This video is a little different than most of my other videos. This is going to be a little more off the cuff, no script, no nothing like that. I saw a lot of things in game chat talking about how the Prospector is nerfed, there's no point in the Prospector, sell your Prospector, all this kind of stuff in global chat and on Spectrum and stuff. And I just wanted to come out and put a video, put some numbers behind all these claims of nerfing the Prospector and whatnot. So I know it's a little different, but bear with me, and hopefully I can put some numbers behind all this, and we can figure out how bad this nerf is, what kind of nerf there was, why are people saying the Mole got buffed, why are people saying the Prospector got nerfed. So let's get into some numbers. Okay, so here's my spreadsheet of data. There's not a lot of data that I could collect. I kind of collected this just over the course of one night. Only had one friend that was able to get on that night because, you know, a lot of people are taking breaks from 3.18 just with the state of the game and everything, and 3.19's in PTU. A lot of people really don't like PTU, so I understand that, and I was only able to get a little bit of test results, but hopefully this is enough to really kind of put a spotlight on the changes that are happening. So I was able to get my friend in a separate Prospector here. We have me solo in a Prospector. We changed out the mining heads to get data on some of that. Obviously, the mining heads aren't what we're focusing on here. It's just kind of to see how the stats change, or like what kind of changes do come along with having a different head on there versus the stock head. We're using the Lancet head here as a separate data set from the Arbor that comes stock on both of these, just because the Lancet's what was the big meta, and I think some of these changes will change that. But again, we're not really talking about the lasers here. I just wanted to show data compared to stock versus if you change it, how does the data change? Whether there was a change in data regarding a different mining head. And then we also were able to get in a Mole, the two of us both in a Mole, both with one laser active, and then both of us with both of our lasers active. So if we look here at this data set, I have all the rocks base stats here. So we got density of 12,000, instability of 0.39, and a resistance of 8%. And then here I have me solo in a Prospector, so the instability went down from 0.39 to about 0.25, which is a negative 35.9% drop in instability. And then the resistance went up to 10%, which is a 25% increase, and that's me solo in a Prospector. And then when we got both of our Prospectors laser on, lowest power setting, we didn't change power settings at all, and laser power didn't seem to affect these stats whatsoever, so that's not a huge deal, but I'm just saying our lasers were at 0%. The resistance, or the instability, actually went down to 0.33, so that was overall a base decrease of 15%, but that actually went up in instability by 32% from our solo Prospector at 0.25. So that's one of the biggest interesting changes here. So instability went up versus one Prospector, but still overall it did go down. So that is actually not too bad. And then the resistance went down to, or went up to about 13%, which is an overall change of 62.5%. And that's really interesting because if you look at the stats of each of these mining heads, they all say they have a 0 change in resistance. But as we can see here on the Arbor head, the base stock Prospector head, the resistance was going up gradually with each laser we turned on. So even though it has a 0 stat, resistance was still going up. And that's one thing that's interesting if we come down here to where we put the Lancet heads on the Prospectors. Let's say this rock here, 18,000 resistance, base instability of 2.76, base resistance of 18%. When my solo Prospector turned its laser on, we had a drop of instability to 2.48. and a base resistance stayed at 18%. So here, the stats of the mining head having a 0 did seem to take into account, because these are both at 18%, no change. Even when we go up to two Prospectors, 18%, no change in resistance. But here's where it gets interesting. The Prospector with a Lancet, with solo, it dropped from 2.76 to 2.48. With 2, it went all the way up to 4.47, which is a massive jump. That's over 80% over just one Prospector, and the overall change with having two Prospectors is 62%. So from 2.76 all the way up to 4.47 with two Prospectors. So when you're running modified heads, at least with the Lancet, the instability jumps a huge amount, which I think is really important, but it still does drop with just one. So that's one big thing to point out here. With just one Prospector, pretty much all the stats are about the same. There really was no nerf to the base Prospector. The nerf comes in when you bring in the second Prospector along. They're really trying to avoid having multiple people in different ships, like the Prospector coming onto one rock trying to mine it, because as we can see here, these instability numbers go way up compared to the one Prospector's mining laser. But again, the one Prospector seems to be doing pretty good here. We have a overall drop of about 10%, give or take, which sounds about right with the Lancet's stat page, says it has about a negative 10% drop. So yeah, there really is no nerf to just soloing in a Prospector. So if you're going out solo and you have a Prospector, there's literally no changes for you other than the changes that happen to everything else, not the Prospector. So no, the Prospector's not dead. There's no nerf to the Prospector. The only nerf comes in when you bring along multiple. Now, the buff to the Mole, on the other hand, is actually pretty interesting, because the Mole, you don't need to bring along 2 ships. This is just talking about having a friend with you or 2 friends with you. Again, I was only able to get 1 friend online that night, but we have stats for both 1 laser and 2 lasers on the Mole. So if we look here, 8,000 mass density, instability is 2.3, resistance is 41%. We have with 1 Mole laser on, 1.49 instability. Again, these are stock heads here. We have 1.49 instability, which is a drop of about 35.2%. And then resistance went up to 52%, which is an increase of 26.8%. So this is interesting, again, because the Arbor head says it has a 0 change in resistance, but here we are seeing a 25% overall change in resistance here. Actually, these are a little volatile, so it seems like it might change based off of rock density and maybe some other stats. Again, there's not a lot of data here, so I can't make any conclusive statements about that, but there is an overall increase in that 25 to 30% range. Even though, again, on the stat page, it says it has a 0 change to resistance. And then here, if we add in the second Mole head, we have a resistance drop, or the instability drop, all the way down to 0.48, from 2.3 down to 0.48, which is a massive 79% drop in instability. And then the resistance jumps up to 65%, which is a 25% increase from our 1 laser, but overall from 2.3 down, or up to, from 41% all the way up to 65%. That's a total increase of about 58.54%, which with the 0 that it's saying it increases the resistance by is interesting with the stock heads. And if we go down here, when we put the Lancet back on there, if we look at this bigger rock here, 13,000 mass, 0.43 instability, 0 resistance. This is a little strange. I found a lot of rocks with 0 resistance, and it was getting really late, so I was just kind of rushing through some of these numbers. But as we can see here, at least with these that do have resistance numbers, resistance doesn't change again when you change over to the Lancet. So that stat of it having 0 resistance does seem to carry over to the Lancets and to the other heads. Whereas the Arbor, for some reason, seems to have just an inherent resistance increase, even though on the stat page it says it doesn't. But here, if we look at these numbers again, we have a 0.43 and 0 for instability and resistance. With 1 laser, it drops down to 0.39 from 0.43, which is about a 9% decrease, which is about on average for the Lancet having that negative 10% instability drop. And then when we go here, turn on our second laser, it goes from 0.43 down to 0.17, which is a 60% drop in instability. So we dropped a ton by having that second Mole head on there. And I can only imagine this would just exponentially increase if you have the 3 Mole heads. And then even if you have 2 moles with, say, all 6 heads on 1 rock, you would drop that instability to nothing, pretty much. So the Mole has a massive buff by having multiple people on multiple turrets, or even multiple moles. And that's where the buffs really come in. We're talking about multi-crew gameplay here now, which is a huge thing that Star Citizen's kind of been pushing for, but really not giving us the tools to utilize that. And now, again, the Prospector is a solo ship, and when you're using it as a solo ship, there is literally no nerf. It is the exact same. The only thing that's changing are the heads, the rocks, the materials. So all in all, I think the Prospector is still very viable. I was able to crack a lot of the rocks that I'm finding, even some of these larger density ones. Now keep in mind, these densities can skyrocket. I've seen some of like 100,000 mass on other people's streams and channels and stuff. So the Prospector, you will have trouble cracking some of those big rocks, but as you can see here, I mean, we have, over 20 rocks here, and none of them have been over, you know, 18,000 was I think the biggest one we found. So you're really not going to be finding those massive rocks every time you go out, but just do keep in mind they are out there. There are rocks that you will not be able to crack with that Prospector, but overall the Prospector is still very viable, especially with the changes to the selling price of these materials. You don't just have to mine Quantanium, you can mine pretty much anything and still turn a pretty good profit. But yeah, this was just meant to be a quick video, show you guys some numbers, tell you guys no, your Prospector's not useless, don't melt it, don't go buy a mole, don't be saving up for a mole if you don't have friends to use the mole with. There is no inherent nerf or buff to both the Prospector and the mole. They stayed pretty much the same when you're using just one seat in them, or one Prospector. So yeah, if you like this kind of more off the cuff, really quick, short, simple video where I just kind of run you guys through some numbers, some of the quick changes that were made to these, and point out some of these false information that's being thrown around in chat of like, you know, Prospector's gone, Prospector's dead, get a mole, you know, I don't really understand it because no one seemed to have actually tested this and looked at any of the numbers. But yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to cover in today's video. Let me know what you guys thought of that, if you guys like this kind of off the cuff. I know I've kind of rambled on a little bit about some of the stats, but you know, there's a lot of things to take in here. A lot of people saying that the Prospector was nerfed when we can see here now it really wasn't, and then the mole got buffed, whereas we can see here it really didn't unless you have those multiple people in those seats. If you want to see more off the cuff videos like this, let me know. I don't really know if I'm gonna do too many more of these just because they're not really my style of video. I prefer the kind of edited, scripted, shot list, like that kind of thing. I'm really particular about that, so I do like those videos more, and I will be putting out some more videos now that I've kind of gotten my life a little bit in order now. We can maybe start making some more consistent content, but just let me know what you guys thought. If you liked it, leave a like. Share this with some people that are thinking about melting their Prospector because they kept hearing in chat, Prospector's dead, Prospector's dead. Yeah, go ahead and share it to get this information out there so that way no one's freaking out about this and telling CIG that they're just trying to sell the bigger ships, because that's not really what's happening here. And hopefully I'll see you guys soon. Take care.